Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Hi, my name is Jodilee. A little bit about myself. I'm 37. I'm a determined, comforting, helpful, loving princess of the King. I enjoy dancing, live music, bonfires, camping, kayaking, traveling, crafting, quilting, and car shows. I also enjoy improving myself spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. I also find helping others and completing goals satisfying. And I'm very nervous. I grew up in Northwest Indiana. It's about 2.5 hours south of here. And I am a believer. I had a large support group in Indiana and a home church. And I've always wanted to travel my whole life. So I had the opportunity to sell my home, and I bought a Volkswagen bus. And I moved to Wisconsin to live with my boyfriend. And we were going to fix the bus up because it was not ready to travel. And that was in May of 2017. And in September of 2017, I became pregnant. The pregnancy was unplanned, and it was not happy news at the time. And my boyfriend, Ryan, and I were not in a position to parent. We both agreed, though, that abortion was not the answer. So our next thought was adoption. And I found myself desperate, full of fear, lonely, angry, and ashamed. I met with my cousin Michelle, who is a doula, and if you don't know what a doula is, it's a birth coach. And she lives in Northwest Indiana. Michelle has a passion, and her purpose for being a doula, and for beginning her doula business, was the loss of her daughter Juno. I was not close to Michelle prior to her losing Juno, but she posted a lot on Facebook, and I got to know her, through that, and my heart ached for her. And so I was sharing with her, about pregnancy and thoughts for adoption, and she said that her and her husband would be overjoyed to adopt. Or she said she would. She said she had to talk to her husband. So this lightened my heart, but at the same time I still was unsure, of what to do. And so she agreed to be my doula, and she was going to travel here when the time came. And so I just kept her updated about, the baby and her progress, and I found out she was a girl right away, and how I was feeling. Well, shortly after that time, about October of 2017, I found the Pregnancy Resource Center, and I met Ashley. And when I first, went, I was very anxious, but I was also hopeful. This was my first pregnancy, and the only time I've been pregnant. And where I was working, I had insurance, but it didn't cover pregnancy. So Ashley was helpful, and I could tell right away that she cared about me, and she helped me find a midwife and create a birth plan. And I was still leaning towards adoption, but I was unsure. So as far as the curriculum for the Pregnancy Resource Center, it was all based on parenting mostly, so I just couldn't, I couldn't watch the videos, I couldn't read the books, I was just constantly crying. So she was able to work with me, and we focused on eating healthy and exercise, and she gave me a book on open adoption, and so I was able to read that, and that really helped give me some perspective. We put all the focus of our meetings on healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby, and it was super hard for me because I was just stuck in self-pity and depression. I felt sorry for myself, and I was in condemnation for the poor choices I had made. And most of the time I just wished I would die. I cried all the time, I cried out to God for help, and I asked, what He would have me do, what He wanted for my child, who I was calling my little pork chop. I felt peaceful about parenting, and I felt peaceful about the adoption, and that did not make my choice any easier. I made the mistake of telling my friends and family about my pregnancy and about, my choices, and I say mistake because everyone had a plan for my life, and it just made my choice harder. They told me their opinions and offered to help, and this only confused me and added to my guilt and self-condemnation. Ashley was very patient with me, and she prayed for me and with me. She held a safe place for me to process with no agenda. It was so helpful to develop a plan with someone who did not have their own personal feelings involved. I met with an adoption agency here in Wisconsin, and I knew right away that this wasn't the choice for me. And after meeting with the adoption agency, I knew that if I did go forward with the adoption, it would be Michelle and Ryan. Michelle's husband's name is Ryan as well. So we had two Ryans. That would be my child's parents. Ultimately, I did choose adoption for my little pork chop. And I had spent so much time choosing that I was 7 months along. And when I called and asked Ryan and Michelle if they were in to adopt the child I was carrying, they said that they were thrilled. So as we found out, we had a lot of work to make the adoption legal because of it being out of state. Through all the information we sorted through, we discovered that it was not going to be financially possible for the adoption to occur unless I went to Indiana to give birth. Though I was still working full-time in Wisconsin, I had to find time to call midwives in Indiana to make an appointment, and I struggled to find someone who could see me so late in my pregnancy and on a Friday so I didn't have to call off work. I was getting very discouraged and weary, and I finally got a hold of a friend who referred me to a doula in Indiana that might be able to help. I called this woman who I'd never met, and I told her my story. Her name is Joy, and I believe that she allowed God to use her mouth to speak my ministry to me. This is what she said. God has chosen you. You were chosen from the beginning of time, not a mistake. God chose your womb to bear this precious little girl, to so selfishly give of yourself, to give your cousin the most precious gift that could ever be given, a child. There is no guilt here. God makes no mistakes. You were chosen to give this gift. You are beyond special to God. He knows your heart and He cries with you. And He too has done the exact same when He gave His only child for us. All things work together for good, not evil. You have a bright future ahead of you. There are hundreds of women coming around you that are going to need your support. You are going to start a huge ministry for hurting women, and I am beyond excited to be alongside you. Joy not only shared this wonderful word from God with me, but she told me that she would be my doula for free, and she also introduced me to the midwife that I used to deliver my daughter. The new midwife was willing to meet with me on a Saturday and to deliver the baby if we wanted to work with her. And then I faced another obstacle, that this midwife did not work in hospitals. So I needed to find a place to have her, to have my baby, and and money to pay for her. Even though there were so many obstacles, I felt God's hand in it all. I was at peace, and things just kept falling into place. After hearing the words Joy spoke, they completely reframed my thinking. I was able to stop focusing on myself and my misery and loss and turn to preparing my little pork chop to meet her new family. I was able to enjoy the time we had together and experience joy and gratitude about the situation. Whenever the old negative thoughts crept in, I reread the words from my friend and reset my thought process, which was usually a daily occurrence. I began to develop a relationship with Michelle and Ryan and further prepare the tiny little baby I was carrying for the transition into their family. They told me that they chose a name for her, Ira Elizabeth. Ira is the goddess of healing, and Elizabeth means promise. Up until now, I had not been able to think of a name besides the little nicknames I had given her. I spoke with my boyfriend Ryan and asked him to help me choose a name, and we settled on Faith. From my experience with my new friend Joy and what God was doing in paving the way to get Ira to her chosen family, I knew that what she was to Ryan and I, a hope of faith. I spent time with Ryan and Michelle on the weekends when I went to Indiana and they went to midwife appointments with me. The midwife recommended having baby Ira at Ryan and Michelle's house, but I was not sure that that would work out for me. I went back to Wisconsin and I continued to work, and I kept in contact with Michelle daily and kept her updated on Ira's movements and my health. At this point, I enjoyed being pregnant, and I knew this was the only time she was going to be only mine, and I cherished it. As my due date got closer, it came time for me to start staying in Indiana, and I couch surfed for 2 or 3 weeks until time came to deliver. But I was thinking about that when I wrote this, and that was like hard to couch surf when you're 9 months pregnant. But we had fun. I got to visit all my old friends in Indiana. I had been gone for so long in Indiana that my boyfriend came to visit one weekend. My original due date was April 20th, and it was now April 27th. I had chosen to give birth at Ryan and Michelle's house, and Michelle was getting very nervous. And since Ryan was on his way, I had a chat with my little pork chop, and I told her that she could come out. They set up a pool for me in Ira's nursery to labor and deliver in, and Ryan got there about 9 p.m., and Ira was born at 5:41 a.m. the next day. And Ryan fell asleep. I remember that. I remember it in my ear. Ryan, baby, and I spent an hour together, just the 3 of us, and the midwife had suggested that I explain to her what was going on and introduce her to Ryan and Michelle, so I did just that. Then we handed her over, and I felt very peaceful about it. It was a long labor and everyone was very tired. And I rested in bed, and it was not very long, and Michelle brought Ira back so I could hold her. I remember crying and thinking she brought her back, and my heart was overjoyed. And I know sometimes you have moments in your life and you just vividly remember, and that's something I hope I never ever forget. It's just the feeling and the love that came from that moment, when she brought her back to me. I wish I could tell you that I lived happily ever after from that point on, but that was not the case. The next few months were miserable. Again, I found myself wishing for death. My boyfriend and I could not talk about it. He was unable to process the situation and turn inwardly. I struggled in between therapy appointments and looking for a support group near me in Wisconsin. And I was able to see Ashley a few times, but I found it was very hard to be around pregnant women or even happy people at all. I did find a therapist here at Calvary and a support group. There was not any nearby, so I started one in Elkhorn, but due to lack of attendance, I'm looking for a new location to have my group. I'd only had one person come in 9 months, so I was at the library and they had asked me to find another place. So it was very disheartening, but I know that, I know God will take care of that detail. I also joined a Bible study group here at Calvary. It's the Pure Desire for Women, 8 Pillars to Freedom group, and it's been transformational. I've been blessed with an open adoption that we have, and I am able to see Ira as much as I would like, which is very hard in the beginning. She lives 142 miles from me, which usually takes 2.5 hours, and it takes my boyfriend about 2. I have been going to see her every other weekend, so I'm able to stay at Ryan and Michelle's house, and that fills my heart until the next visit. I've grown very close to their whole family, and I have a great support system there and here in Wisconsin. Ryan and I still struggle with the choice we made, tearing at our hearts. We know what was best for her was not necessarily the best choice for us. Some days are harder than others. Ira has a life that I dreamed she would. She is the happiest baby and brings joy to all. In closing, I would like to say an unplanned pregnancy has such a huge impact on everyone that is touched by it. Everyone I know had ideas that they thought would be best for me and my child. These opinions and ideas have caused me to lose many relationships with friends and family. I have worked at being graceful to allow space for other people to process this experience for themselves and to make choices that are best suited for them. I have lost a lot and have been very lonely. I have learned that there is a purpose for the pain. I hope to work with this center to help other families that are considering adoption, and I know it's my ministry to walk alongside people who are facing placing a child for adoption or that have placed a child for adoption. I will remain to hold a place for those with grief and healing and hope of forgiveness and joy. I owe a huge debt of gratitude to the Pregnancy Resource Center, and specifically Ashley for being my safe harbor in the storm. She was my weekly lighthouse in my troubled waters. She kept the light of the Lord shining for me in a very dark place. Thank you for your time.